Hello there, everyone, and thanks for tuning in today. I am just gonna jump right into my desktop here. I am spending today, or at least part of today, labeling a world map for a client. And I don't have anything particular to present or to say today. I'm mostly just going to be sitting around putting some labels on this thing. I actually have a large chunk of it labeled already. I'm turning some layers on and off here in Illustrator. I've got my layers panel just off screen to save a little space. But this is a world map, and I have labeled basically North and Central America, and that leaves a lot of the rest of the world. And I'm definitely not going to get done today, not going to get done this week or next week or the week after, but eventually I will. So since people seem to, based on YouTube past views and such, since people seem to like watching me label things, I just thought I'd go live with this and let you tune in and see what's happening. So feel free to say hi in the chat, or as we go along, feel free to ask questions about what's going on. But just a few general basic things about this project. This is a world map that is, it runs a little slow here because it's giant. It's 6 feet wide, so that's a couple of meters wide, and that's a scale of about 1 to 27 million. It's built on natural earth data, and it is primarily a map of settlements and political features. There's some physical features thrown in there. We'll just zoom in here on kind of some of the work that I've already done. It is very dense. The labels are pretty packed in there. Right now they're a little bit hard to read at times because I haven't done any knockouts, where I might, for example, drop out part of this river here to help make that label for Memphis more readable. I haven't done any of that. There's also no halos around the text, so that the red stands against the background red, because sometimes the background red gets pretty dark over here. I should mention the background colors. There's a few interesting things going on here. There are 4 colors in the sort of pink-red family, representing sort of 4 broad categories of land cover: deserts, Arctic, woodlands, and grasslands. And so just kind of very roughly taken some data sets and divided up the world. And so that's the 4 main colors, and then overlaid on that, you'll see they get lighter and darker, is a shaded relief, but it's broken into these little sort of facets using a filter in Photoshop. You can also see the same thing going on with the ocean hydrography here. This is a map, this isn't like your general purpose like National Geographic wall map. It's for a private client. It's kind of an art piece for this person's home, so we can play around and be a little bit fun with that sort of thing. The only other thing I'll mention right now, and you're free to ask questions as we go along, is there's no niceties for the type legibility yet. We'll wait till we get all the labels in place before we do that. And if you see little halos around the city symbols, that's just to help me figure out roughly how to position the labels to make sure they're spaced roughly evenly. So I've just got little halos around there for now. So yeah, happy Tuesday, Jake. Thanks for tuning in. Ibrahim, good to see you here. I think you've been at practically all my streams. I appreciate being able to count on you showing up. I just did this impromptu in the middle of the day, and I thought, well, gee, I wonder if anybody's going to tune in, especially because it's, here in the United States, it's a holiday week, so I think people are starting to travel, people are starting to go on vacation, but I thought, I'm not. I'm at home. I got work to do, so I thought I would get this thing going. So thanks for stopping in. Hello, Alex. See, I've already, 5 minutes in, and I've already got 3 or 4 chat messages. That is pretty good for an impromptu stream. So I am going to turn on my reference layer here, which has a bunch of labels already kicked out of ArcMap. And right now I'm working on the Lesser Antilles. That's kind of where I left off yesterday. Oh, actually, what I need to do is need to grab my phone, and I need to go into my time tracking app. As I work on projects as a freelancer, it's good to track how much time I spent on them, both because I have clients that I bill by hour, and when I don't bill clients by hour, it's still useful for me to make sure that my estimate of how long something was going to take matched up with reality. So I'm just going to clock in for this project so that I can keep track of that. Getting to this point, all the color design, the typographic design, and getting the initial set of labeling. I think, how many hours am I into this project? Let's see here. Report on oh, it's in here somewhere. Oh, that's because I'm looking at last year's data. That's what the problem is. I am 66 hours into this project, although the majority of that has not been labeling. The majority was back and forth with the client to figure out, like, what are the colors, what are the styles that this person liked, and that we could make work within the sorts of time frames and budget. Probably labeling 15 hours, 20 hours maybe so far. Professional development time for the week. Oh, great. How much professional development, like, is that mandatory, or do you get an allotment for that sort of thing? Because that was something I tried to get I applied for at one point I applied for a salaried position, making some maps for an organization. That was one of the things that we talked about with them. Like, do I get time to just sort of mess around and learn new skills and things like that? Because that's what I do as a freelancer, and I wanted to make sure that I had a position that would let me do that kind of thing. Ended up not taking that job, decided freelancing was still better for me, but yeah, that's it's good you get that sort of thing, though. Top Tracker. Not familiar with Top Tracker. I use Harvest, and it's just it's got a website too. It's got an app for the phone, and I don't pay for it. The free version is enough. You technically get only 2 projects, but every project can have a bunch of tasks. So I call my freelancing a project, and then each client is a task under the project. So I can still use the free version of Harvest. Okay, so we're here in the Lesser Antilles, and basically I'm just taking these existing things and styling them, and I'm going to start down here actually, and I've got various paragraph styles, so I've got a lot of things set, although I still haven't saved some of the ones that I'm regularly using. So I'm often just eyedroppering instead. I do have a spec sheet in case I forget anything. I don't usually make spec sheets. This is only the second project that's been big enough where I really needed to write down everything just to make sure that I don't forget what's going on, what colors, what symbols are we using, etc. Let's see, so this is... Oh, I actually haven't had to do one of these yet. Small level admin 0 capital. So that's going to be 7-point italic. I'm using Adobe Caslon because it's just such a wonderfully flexible typeface. It's got small caps, it's got swashes like these, it's got 3 different weights, it's got, I really like to use it on a lot of projects. It's just so flexible to make so many different type styles that all fit together, but you create enough of a hierarchy to really see a lot of differences. Your Jake's boss invites you to do a couple hours every week. labeling. Yes, labeling is one of my cartographic weaknesses too. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I love labeling so much, although obviously a project of this magnitude can push my tolerance for these kind of things. And that's been a little bit of something I've struggled with a little bit on this project, because I really like pinning down the perfect position for labels and having open and flowing typography, and this doesn't allow for that. I mean, if I turn off the base map stuff here for a minute, this is very dense, and oftentimes you're just in a situation where so I'm just shrinking down my layers panel here that I keep off screen. You're just in a situation where you just got to put it where it can fit, and that's not confusing versus the most elegant position. So I keep looking at this and saying, it looks kind of inelegant, but it works, and it allows us to get a lot more density. And I bounced some of these early things back to the client and made sure that person was comfortable with the density versus the chaos, because I said, we could pare this back some, label fewer things, and then we'd probably have a little bit more elegant typography. But it's important to her that we kind of cram as much information in as possible. So that's where we've ended up with this kind of thing. But it's a little bit different than my normal style. So that can be a bit of a struggle for me. Top Tracker is a free tool with no limits. To make an invoice, the client has to make the project on their account. Yeah, I don't use... Harvest does invoicing too, but I haven't used it for that. I just look up how many hours are involved in the project, and then I send the invoice that way. And as far as keeping things in my head, that's pretty much what I do, Jake. I just or just, eyedropper, look over on the previous map. If I'm making a series of maps, I'll just keep one open, make the next one, copy, paste, that kind of thing. It's for small projects, it's fine. I usually haven't run into trouble, but definitely for this one, we gotta keep it organized. And more importantly, I wanted to make sure that for something like this, I'm going to put these in one line, I think, just to, we'll try that out for now, just to take up less space as we get close to moving grid, rather than having both sides of the dot. I don't want to, later on I'm going to have stuff here probably flying out into the sea, so I want to keep space for that. But yeah, for something like this, I just wanted to make sure to have it documented, to say, to make sure the client approved everything, because if I'm going to spend forever labeling all this, I want to make sure that we have it written down. This is definitely what we want, and this is definitely, and some things may need to change later, but we can at least point back to the thing and say this is kind of what we agreed to, and so we knew we started from a good, strong position. So I'm just eyedropping these, copying the styles over, and what I also have going on here as a way of organizing myself and making sure that I don't miss anything is that I've got a layer with arc labels, and it's got all the different kinds. Admin 0, Admin 1, some peaks, ocean and geo regions, lakes, and so on, as well as capitals and cities of different scale ranks. I'm using the natural earth scale rank, so these aren't scaled by population. They're scaled by the natural earth scale rank, which is a combination of population and regional importance. But I have all those. These are just the ones kicked out of ARC. And then, as I go along, I move them into my type layer so that I know I did those ones, so that later on I can track down any stragglers by checking out the ARC labels layer at the end and say, oh, I missed one over here, etc. So, I'm not going to move these each one at a time. I'm going to move them in blocks to the new layers when I'm ready, but yeah. Alright, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Already comes abbreviated here in the label that comes out of Natural Earth. Although, let me just copy this over here and see if we can fit the whole thing. St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Okay, so I'm gonna need, if I want to fit that, something of that size. Okay, it's going to step on my Lesser Antilles label. Although I could move that the Lesser Antilles label sort of float up here. It's a weird label. That was one of the last ones I placed yesterday, because the Lesser Antilles is this arc of lines, or arc of islands, going all the way down over to the South American coast, all the way up to the Dutch Antilles of Aruba and Curacao. And it's an awkward kind of thing to label because you don't want to curve it all the way down here and track with everything. So I checked my Net Geo Visual Atlas that I won in a student contest like 10 years ago, and this is how they labeled it, and I think that's reasonable to do. I'm thinking, I don't know if it'd be crazy to just label in a curve Kingstown, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, all the way up there. Maybe that's crazy. Maybe that's too much. But let's give it a go. I'm just gonna alt drag over here the Bahamas label just so I have a curved piece of text. And there's all this trial and error that goes on labeling. Yeah, this is gonna be a long one. So maybe we will stick with the abbreviated version. Although, I don't know, I feel like those abbreviations require that you kind of know what it already says. Like that you remember that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a country. But if you don't know, then it's not going to be as good at teaching. I mean, I could put an abbreviation table next to it. And I've done that in a few places. We talked to the client and I talked, and they wanted subnational boundaries for certain countries. There's too many, and the data are too hard to, quality data are too hard to come by for a lot of countries. But for at least Canada, US, Mexico, and a few other countries we're going to get to, we wanted subnational units labeled. And you get down into Mexico, and there's just an abbreviation table over here because there's way too much to label in the space that's available. And I may tweak how this ends up looking and put a little, header on it or something like that later on, but it's going to be for later. Yeah, if I can get all of these labeled just in context. Like we did Kingstown. Actually, yeah, so I think we're going to go for it. I think we're going to go for it just as a long label. We'll move Bridgetown so it's not quite so tight there. And then we'll just tweak the curvature here so it doesn't flap, because I want it to end kind of straight. Kenny, thanks for joining. I'm spoiling you. I mean, it's funny. I've actually had this stream planned for months. I kept saying, like, when it comes time to start labeling this map. This project has been in progress since the summer, I want to say, maybe late spring. I'd have to check my records, but I kept saying, there's going to be a lot of labeling. People seem to like my labeling videos, so why not do at least some of this live? And I got permission from the client to do that. But it's been a while to get to this point where we were ready to label, because there was a lot of style development time. Yeah. St. Lucia. We'll shift the Lesser Antilles label just a little bit in a minute for that. See, now the thing is, when you start curving labels, you have to curve other labels because they hit them. If you're not careful. The annoying thing that I have going on is I have to keep I'm constantly moving these labels around, so I have to keep all the different layers of labels unlocked, which means I also accidentally move things that I didn't mean to move. Ordinarily I keep stuff locked down that I'm not actively using, but there's so many different layers. There'd be so much on and off. It'd just be really slow. Let's save here. This is my working number 50. I just keep incrementing this every once in a while. Actually, I think I haven't saved a new version in a while, so let's do that. Working number 16. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Dominica, Roselle, I think we'll just, these are both going to be too big to go, nothing's going to fit here. So instead, we're going to do both these labels in a line. Yeah. There we go. The nice thing about having this being pretty open ocean is I can fly this label right out into there. And I'm trying, given the amount of labeling to do, I'm trying not to second guess my decisions too much. Again, in a more open labeling context, I would be obsessing about every little bit of curvature, every little positioning, but there's so much to do here, and it's so dense that I can't find the perfect place, quote unquote, for these things. It's finding the place that just works. All right, so we got a lot of stuff going on here. I'm gonna check my, actually, we'll just check Google for reference. Because the labels that I have are just kind of everywhere. And I need to be able to make sure that I know which of these is which, because you can't tell the way it is right now. I will pull all these aside, and it labeled each little individual item. St. Martin, San Martin. All right, so these are what we're gonna have to fit. Some of these are not actually all countries, even though they're my countries layer, because Natural Earth labeled them as their admin 0 units include like overseas territories like the British Virgin Islands, and I'm labeling those as subnational entities. So let's start here with Guadeloupe. And they didn't give me a label for Guadeloupe. Interesting. All right. Well, we'll make our own. I'll just copy this already curved thing. I'm trying not to type too many labels myself. I believe Guadeloupe is owned by France, right? An overseas department of France. Yep. I'm trying not to do too much typing myself. Instead, I'm taking the labels that got kicked out of ArcMap, which I do use sometimes. I mean, you've seen me use QGIS on this channel, but I also use ArcMap from time to time, and its output for text is a little bit for text is a little cleaner. So I did it. That's why I went there. But if I don't do any typing myself, then I'm less likely to make a typo, which is good, because there are thousands of labels that will end up on this map, and hopefully I don't spell anything wrong. It's going to get checked later on by a third party, hopefully, to make sure of that. But it's if I'm taking the labels that come out of ArcMap, they come straight from the shapefiles, so they're more likely to be correct, because by now Natural Earth has been around long enough. Most spelling errors have been corrected, although I did find one yesterday that I submitted as a change. I've been, for certain cities, you'll see them in green, and that's because I checked them. I did a few hours of automated processing to check against the U.S. federal, the Board and Geographic Names, to see if there were variations that they had in their official spellings. This one is just whether or not there's hyphens, but sometimes they're a little bit more extensive. Like Bilwi, which is that's the State Department's official name, versus Puerto Cabezas. Right, so sometimes there's some different names out there for different places, and we kind of decided to go with the U.S. Board on Geographic Names, U.S. federal standards, where there are people who've kind of thought about this stuff for a while and figured it out. Okay, so St. John's, Antigua and Barbuda. So that, how are we gonna? I could go between the D and the I of West Indies, or I can tuck under the eye and go above Guadeloupe, which I think, I'll just tuck Guadeloupe down a little bit. And I think we're going to do another one of these super long things. I think that's going to be the best. Although, well, yeah. I think it would point to the dot better if it were curved the other way, but that's probably going to look weird, isn't it? Oh, didn't want to move you. Is that going to look weird? Spreading out versus where, you know, with the curvatures are being different, these curve down, Guadeloupe, British Virgin Islands, and eventually this will not say St. Vincent, say Antigua and Barbuda. Will that look funny there? But it's clearer. It points more correctly to the thing it means to. So I think that's what we'll do. First off, though, I actually need to put you on a curve. And get that positioned. Yeah, it's a pretty good distance. St. John's, and then, well, ordinarily I like the different label types separated, even though they're on, technically it's one line. So we're going to take this, copy it, and Barbuda. Copy the style. There we go. Now it's going to be on the same curvature, even though it's actually two labels. And we delete that from our list. This way I can just make sure that one of these labels goes in one layer, one of them goes in another. Okay. Yeah. All right, St. Kitts and Nevis is this one here, so that's going to go this way. I'm going to take the British Virgin Islands, make that go up a little bit more, get out of the way. And we're really going to do basically the same thing here. You know, people ask me sometimes, or they have this opinion of cartographers, in which they assume that we just know all the geography, all the capitals, all the countries. And working on projects like this certainly helps remind you of them. I just realized Basseterre, that label steps on. Okay, it steps on Barbuda. I just wanted to make sure this island here that my label steps on isn't an island I need to label. But that island is Barbuda of Antigua and Barbuda, so we're okay. And this is not a super large scale map where we need to like really distinguish between which islands are controlled by which polities. So we're good there. But yeah, I did used to kind of know all the capitals and countries and such, and it's mostly just from making maps, not that I had to memorize it in order to become a map maker, but I have to explain that to people. Alright, St. Kitts and Nevis. Okay, no, Montserrat, okay. Well, that's going to be between next to St. John's. Right there. Okay, this one is getting tight enough that need to pointer that in. Just grab a little lead line there that I've already got made. And if you all weren't here, I'd probably be talking to myself anyway. Maybe not quite as much, but definitely some. Yeah, that'll work. Anguilla. Oh, and there's Saint Martin. Which, I don't know if you've ever, seen the photos from it. So this is a small island that is divided between the Netherlands and France. And it has an airport in which dangerous looking landings happen. Let me see here. Princess Juliana International Airport. Because the airport is just right next to the beach. It's a very small island, and so those planes come in super low, which sounds kind of exciting to be on the beach and see it happen, but I'm just surprised nobody's died yet at this stage. St. Martin Airport will no longer see packed 747 jumbo jets, but maybe they're putting a stop to it. I don't know what they would do because, again, there's not a lot of room for their airport. Maybe they're just only going to fly smaller jets. Where is the airport? So this is the thing. When I make maps, I end up taking these little... Yep, there we go. There's the airport. I end up taking these little detours where I learn facts and I read stuff on Wikipedia or look at pictures or whatever. So there's a lot of fun knowledge that comes in because I feel like, you label a place. There's I don't know, you're starting to get to know it a little bit when you know what something is called. And I should caveat that different places have multiple names to them, but when you start to learn what something is called, that's a step in trying to learn a little bit about its identity. So I try and do that. Okay, so I was gonna, Saint Martin, Anguilla. That's these here. Where are we gonna put that? I might be able to tuck it between the D and the. Yeah, I would make it one line that says Saint Martin, France, Saint Martin, Netherlands. Or I could run it under the Virgin Islands like this. Where is St. Barthélemy? Okay, that's that one. Which, as it so happens, doesn't appear that's interesting. The 50 million data set for natural Earth. Okay, hold on here. Because I don't see the island, but I got a label for it, so that means it pulled it out of somewhere for natural Earth. So I'm just going to check natural Earth, 50 million. Let me turn off these, that'll help. Yeah, that's St. Barthélemy. Okay, so why don't I have that? Well, that's an interesting thing that's happened. That island doesn't exist anymore. In my base map. That's a different. That's something I'll have to solve a little. Oh, I wonder actually. Hold on here. I bet I know what happened. Yeah. Okay. Haha. I'd seen this happen in a couple other spots, and now I know what's going on. That's interesting. So the Natural Earth 50 million land data set has some land in it. You know, it's just all the land. But the 50 million countries data set has some extra little specks of land. And I know Natural Earth serves a separate, besides land file, there's also the Small Islands file that they additionally have. And I guess I didn't realize that the Small Islands file was needed to bring the land up to the full complement that also includes all the pieces that you see in the countries. Okay. Well, now a lot of this makes sense. So there is a small island here of St. Barthélemy that does not appear. I've got a raster base map here because there's relief and there's other stuff. Plus, it's just it runs a lot faster to get through this. So I'm gonna have to make changes to that, but I think that's going to be off stream. That's going to be slow and time intensive, and it's not. I want to do labeling right now, but I will leave myself a note to do get extra islands into land file for base map, and I will at least think about my labeling in terms of needing to be able to fit that in there. I'm just glad I solved that mystery, because at one other point I saw one tiny island that was missing, and it was not a big thing as far as like it wasn't missing a overseas dependency or whatever. But yeah. Alright, this might need to go up there to make enough room, because I have two different things that gotta label Anguilla and Saint Martin / Saint Martin. Or Anguilla. I'm not sure how the British say it. Anguilla. I just, it's by this point it's been anglicized, so who knows. I bet Wikipedia would tell me. John Campbell, welcome. Been binge watching more plays. Well, I appreciate those views. I appreciate that. There's I appreciate that content is enlightening or entertaining somebody. That's why I make it. It's just always have this urge to share what I'm doing, and also it's connected with my urge to stay in the public eye. Like, what if people didn't watch me? Would I make maps? Would I be a cartographer anymore? I would, but I don't know. I'm kind of always addicted to the fame, even though fame is a very not quite accurate word for the level of attention that I might draw. Alright, and then we're going to have this island that is split between two countries, but at our scale we're definitely not going to talk about the boundary line between them. So this is going to be there's no period after Saint Martin. I wonder if that's correct. These oddities that you find sometimes. Okay, yeah. Alright. Saint Martin and Saint Martin. It says I'm overset. Oh, because I don't have the word France in there. That's what that little tiny plus sign means. My text is overset. Don't have enough space for all of it. I think we're just going to be able to make it work. And that's what we can do, make it work. It's a little, I was going to say it's a little inelegant, but I kind of like all those sweeping curves. And I do feel accomplished for having fit all this stuff in. Can I nudge the West Indies a little bit to get that D farther away? Yeah, I think that's better. If this were National Geographic, they'd probably insist that every label curve down or up, just as long as it's consistent, probably down. But I don't know if that's the right call here. Although now I kind of want to try it. Because that would go here. That would go here. That would go here. Well, I saved it, so we'll give it a go. And I'll change the direction of the arrow a little bit later on if I like it. That would mean Guadalupe should curve just a little bit more to give some space. If I just flip this over, I'm not going to move the St. John's label yet. I'm just testing this out. This is real rough. And get over there. The thing is, it does look kind of better, but I don't know if I'd have enough space. Actually, with the right curvature, I could make that work. And that does kind of look better. Okay, we'll make it happen. We'll make it happen. I guess those National Geographic people were right in their particular preferences for these curve labels that they call water bugs. Or at least that's what I was told by somebody who used to work there, actually works there again now, and maybe they still call them that. Alright, copy this label, paste it in front, cut that, paste it into there. Okay, yeah. Also, just to note, I'm using all kinds, I'm just kind of going in the flow here. I do have my little Keycaster app in the upper right corner. So if you want to see the buttons I'm clicking, if that is of any use to you, I use a lot of shortcuts. It's just letting you know, like, I'm hitting space right now. I'm holding space down while I click so I can pan around the map. Now I'm holding Option and using my mouse wheel. Now I hit V to go to my selector. Command X to cut that, etc. Actually, I don't want to cut that yet. I want to copy and then paste in front so that I have a copy of that line, and then I want to cut this text and paste it on one of those lines. And if you have questions about why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, please do ask me. Happy to offer some of my advice or thoughts as you look over my shoulder. I think this is going to work. I think it's going to work. Just need to not have to label anything else in this zone, and we'll fit it. It's a little tight, but I think it looks better. This is the pondering phase, though, where I just sit back for a second. San Martin. So San Barthélemy, that we'll eventually label, is right there. So it's going to be right about here. So I'll pre-label it now. And this is French, right? With a name like that? Okay, yep. So I'll put that label about where the thing's going to end up once I correct the missing piece of the base map. And so we'll have that label about here, and then it'll point into where the island's going to go eventually. That makes Montserrat in need of a curve, so it doesn't run into that. Also, I didn't say that, that's UK. And I had forgotten to say that that's a UK dependency. No, you change your curvature just a little bit. What are we running? Oh, running into the Caribbean Sea. There's flexibility to shift that label a little bit. That's fine. That's fine. We can move you. And see, this one I think needs an arrow, whereas some of the other ones don't, because it's close enough to a bunch of other islands. We want to make sure it doesn't get confused. For that a reader doesn't confuse it for certain other ones, whereas some of these other island groups, there's other clues. If you see St. John's, Antigua and Barbuda, well, there's this white label, St. John's, and it's next to only one white thing, so now we know this goes with that thing. U.S. Virgin Islands, this label points only into this one island. That's clear. Stuff like that. The nice thing about curved labels is, something I described on a live stream last year during how to do map stuff, and I've said a few other times in a few other places. I like doing curved labels, both because of their aesthetic properties, but also because, I'm just going to get this curvature just right here before I zoom out and show you what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's better. Nice thing about curved labels, I think, is that they lend what I call a ballistic certainty to features. If I have straight labels, we're trying to build connections between the feature and the thing. But if I have a curved label, one way we can do that is by having the label flow toward the thing. It's very clearly, it's following a ballistic trajectory that our eye and brain kind of are already attuned to from nature. And it's obviously pointing toward this one dot, Santiago de Cuba. So that's just kind of my philosophy about that. Also, can I do Montego Bay as... Yeah, that's a little bit better. Tuck that with the E and the G in there. Kind of a nicer geometry. Does that allow me to do the Cayman Islands? I had to have that arrow because it's a little far apart, but I think if I move Montego Bay like that, I can move the Cayman Islands like that, and now it's fine. Solved. And it occurs to me, yeah, I just wanted to make sure there's not going to be another island there that we should nudge it for, but I think we're going to be fine. Man, I'm glad I discovered that. That secret thing about I should have added the islands file. Because I built the base map, the mask is just with the land filter. I'm just thinking that's not gonna be too hard, but there's a couple little tweaks I gotta make to add those in. Okay, back to frantically panning around. I'm gonna need an arrow eventually when San Bartholomew is added in. I'm just going to guess where it should point, and then we'll see later on when I adjust the map if I'm correct. These are bits of the Netherlands, but they're small enough that we're not going to label them. Yeah, it's going to be right about here. Okay. So, all of that, oh, that's pretty clean. So now I'm going to do that thing I mentioned before where I'm just going to tuck these into their correct groups now. Right, I get my layers, I have the arc labels, I have the type layer, and so I just need to move things from one to another to their constituent sublayers just so that I have tracked that I did them, so that I make sure I don't miss anything. And when I asked ArcMap to kick out all the labels, I did make sure to tell it, label everything, even if you don't think there's room for it, to make sure that every label went on there so that I have all of them as reference materials. Although now, just a second, I can curve you a little less. Can I, oh, no. Just wondering if I can I tuck that? If I change the curvature, I should stop obsessing. No, we're going to leave it. Stop obsessing. It's good. It works. And we need to move on. Okay, so these are some of the ones that I did not... Oh, nope. Type. Turn off my type layer, so anything I see is not in the type layer. So, select all these things in white. Type layer, capitals, 4 to 6. Move those to the minor capitals layer. That layer is off right now, so they vanish. These are admin zeros. That was easy. Done. These are apparently already in the correct setting, correct location. They are, except for there's... no, because I've been copying some of these, copying and dragging some of these labels, and then typing over them, so they're already in the correct areas, although it looks like a couple of them are not. These get tucked in the physical labels. That's no good. Also, which one of these did I select? Okay. Or actually, it says these are medium-sized capitals here. Nope, these are admin zeros. Please put them in the correct layer. Something's odd here. I always got to keep organized. Physical labels. Okay, so these says these are physical labels. Then why did you say that I had... I'll bring this up here, the excitement of checking what stuff is where. Turn off the arc labels for a minute. I'm looking at things that are yellow. Capital, medium. Huh. Apparently Guatemala label is in the wrong zone, and I will clean these up probably when the whole map is done too. But it'd be nice to get them now. You also go into the admin 0 layer. And you two go to minor capitals. All right, things are where they ought to be. What is my monitor setup? So I have a 27-inch iMac. This is my second one in a row. Had this one 5 years now, and I had one for about 4 years, 4 or 5 years before that, the previous generation. This is one of those 5K monitors, which the downside was that Apple released a 5K monitor without really putting a graphics card in that could support that many pixels, so, and software needed to catch up, so things have often run a little slow, especially when doing graphics-y things. I've seen people with portrait setups. I've never really used one myself. I know I see people doing it with code and stuff, which I think makes a lot of sense. Code or writing in general, very linear, very portrait-y documents. To me, I feel like with most of my work, it probably wouldn't make much difference one way or the other, would be my guess. But my main thing is that I want a lot of space. So that's why I went with the iMac originally, because I wanted a large monitor, and I wanted a good quality monitor. And at the time, I used a little bit of Apple products before, in the cartography lab at the University of Wisconsin, for example, where I'm a fellow there and where I went to graduate school. And so I was familiar with those, and I knew that basically Apple was making pretty good quality monitors that were very large, and they already had a computer built in. So I said, that'll work for me, and I just kind of have stuck in their ecosystem since that point. Although obviously there's plenty of other options. Right now you're looking at the roughly the top left quarter of my monitor. I've got stuff off screen, and that's partly so that my broadcast is not some insane number of pixels, all the interface being so tiny you can't see what's going on, and it just gives me a place to store other stuff. Like I'm monitoring the chat over here off screen and stuff like that, and my stream quality and how many concurrent viewers and all that stuff. So there are 6 people concurrently watching right now. Not bad at all. Not bad for labeling. All right, so now we're going to move into South America. And there's a lot of stuff to label here, and what I've learned after having done the United States and Canada is that labeling the large physical features is probably the best place to start, right? These big tracked out labels, like here we've got Great Plains, Rocky Mountains, and just putting all that in, and some of the river labels, and then making the cities fit around it. And I've occasionally deleted cities just for space constraints, generally trying to avoid that, but making that stuff fit around is a lot easier than, imagine if you had labeled this area and then you had to try and fit in a Great Plains label. All right, doing it now, or Central Lowlands and such, doing it now, a lot easier. So getting that done first for a lot of the physical stuff is important. Alex, you have 27-inch monitors, so 2, is that 2 or more? You feel like you're short of space. Yeah, I definitely, there are times when I think, a second one would be nice. But okay, you have two as well, John. I've only got the one, but I feel like I definitely feel like a second one would be nice. So it's possible that when I rotate this computer out and get another one, I might keep the computer itself and use it as a monitor. There's a way to do that, I think, with iMacs. I think it requires some proprietary connector, because everything does from Apple. but that's that might be an option for the future, because it'd be nice to have like a full, just like full screen document that I'm working on, and on the other screen I could have my Illustrator tools or QGIS or this reference material, because right now I'm switching. I'm saying, oh, let's check Wikipedia, let's check Google Maps to make sure I've got this or that correct, and I've got a few other things that I might need here, like the GeoNames database, but I've also got QGIS. So being able to, instead of alt tabbing, just be able to look to the side, that would be kind of nice. Yeah, once in a second, I'll never go back. And it's funny, I'm actually I'm planning a probable trip next year, a long bike trip, and that will be me traveling with a laptop, and I'm going to be working from the road, and I don't know how I'm going to survive on a monitor yay big. I know people who make maps on not just laptops but small laptops, and I don't know how they do it. It's real rough. So here I've got the natural earth regions, geographic regions. So we got your Amazon Basin and so on, Brazilian Highlands, and I've got them by scale rank. For this map, we decided to go with just the top 4 scale ranks, and so I'm going to turn off level 3 for a minute. We're basically going to I'm just going to label in order, try and get things at level 1, things at level 2, things at level 3 where I think it'll fit. But first, we're going to do the Amazon Basin and the Andes. And so I've got the polygons here, and this is just to give me a reference. And I just got to check QGIS to make sure, I got the right polygon for that. This is the Amazon Basin. Yeah, there we go. 2 monitors, no space on the desk. Yeah, I might need a bigger desk if I went to a second monitor. And I would definitely have some. I definitely would be prone probably to some further distractions. So this is. There's some advantages, and right now, I'm streaming and got everything focused. So what I'm not doing right now, because I'm streaming and I've got those things kind of minimized and off to the side because I'm cramming everything into small spaces. So I'm not constantly checking Twitter or my email. So there's some advantages to these kind of things, definitely. So Amazon Basin. This feature is kind of... I selected the one. I accidentally clicked and made a small change to a layer that is very slow. For whatever reason, my points layer, where I've got the city points, if I do anything there, it's super slow. So the Amazon Basin, I could label that on a curve along here, but I think it's kind of a rectangular enough feature that probably a straight label is going to make the most sense to me. Paragraph styles. I'd never bothered to save the one. I'm just going to save label style for here. I just picked a label that was up here, the Canadian Shield, that's already in the style. And I saved the major physical feature style. So if I click Amazon Basin down here, major physical, it picks that style up. And these are called paragraph styles. I'm not making paragraphs, obviously, but if you ever use InDesign, this makes much more sense. Basically, a block of text has a paragraph style applied to it. An individual word or two within a paragraph, within a block of text, has a character style applied to it. So there's paragraph styles and character styles. It's all a little counterintuitive for map labeling, but it makes more sense if you're setting large blocks of text. Well, this is actually a pretty good place for the label because there's not so much going on in the Amazon basin as far as cities. Not a lot of people live there. Thick jungle, thick rainforest. So I think this is a good area. Also, you notice the dashed lines here for Brazil. This is one of the 7 or 8 countries where we're going to do the admin 1 units, the states and provinces for certain countries. Brazil is one of them. So I'm eventually going to get so we've got the names here. May have to look up an abbreviation table for some of them depending on how big those things turn out. All right, so we can delete this reference feature. That's the Amazon Basin. So next up, the Andes. Turn back on my Geo Regions. Nope, need to select the one. So there's overlapping features. That's why I've got the QGIS Natural Earth Reference. Because I need to select just the polygon, not that one. That's not the Andes. Not that one. Those are within the Andes. I need to select the entire Andes polygon. I'm going to move it to its own layer. All right, so I get my reference here. Moved it from Geo Regions up to layer 59. Turn off Geo Regions, and now I know I can just look at that and see exactly what I'm working with. And Shift X to just flip the fill and stroke. Except make the stroke not 0. So, Andes is a short word. I'll probably use Andes Mountains to fill that space better. Do people call them the Andes Mountains, or do they just say the Andes? The Andes Mountains, or Andean Mountains. Yeah, so Andes Mountains. It's going to be a reasonable variant. I'm going to need to develop how big is this text? Okay, that's 8 point. Yeah. I could actually probably make Amazon Basin 9 point. Yeah, it's big enough. I don't want to go crazy. I mean, you could really fill this space by going like, 12 point and 1500, but I don't think we need to go crazy and make that really stand out over everything else. But we'll say 9 point. I think that's pretty good. I usually don't put text on super complicated curves, but the Andes might need to be an exception. I usually have single arcs like this that I use, but for something like the Andes, we'll fit a path, and it's going to be more complicated than an S-curve. So I'll add 1 extra point in here. Let me make this stand out a little better. Green. I want my selection color for everything in this label to be green. So maybe that'll pop out a little bit better visually to you and to me. So let's just get that curvature about right. Well, man, that's a complex curve, but I think the label will be spaced well enough that we probably, where did I put it? Go to outline mode, Command Y, back there. All right, I'm typing on this path, Andes Mountains. I'm just going to eyedropper the text type from Amazon Basin. And we have type on a path, options, and move that to centered on my line. Which does have some weird downsides, centering it. Let me just show you. In a straight line here, Andres, which I spelled wrong, but this is just an example. Type on a path. If I center it, Oh no. And I have small caps. Wait, it's not doing it now. Is it not doing the thing that I was doing before? Okay, never mind. The thing I was going to show you is no longer true. Was it true in the italic? Okay, it's true in the italic. That's weird. So notice how it's actually centering each character along the line. When I make the typeface italic, that was happening before, and I thought, like, oh, that looks weird. I want these labels to be curved, but on a common baseline. But when it's not italic, it doesn't. That's weird. Okay. Well, I don't need to worry about that happening here, at least, because this is not italicized. Okay, so now we've got a big long curve. Now, there's a limit to how far we want to track this stuff out before it gets crazy. Move this off. One, we don't want to make our label upside down. All right. Like if I shift this a little bit more, you can see Andes, A-N-D-E-S. No, that's terrible. Can't have that. You want to make sure the text is right side up. So we'll limit, and we can maybe, that's a little bit rotated upside down, but not very far. But that's going to limit how far we want to do this. The other thing is, how far do we want to space these things out before it stops being a word and it just becomes, oh, that's an M, that's an O, and you don't see them as a word, especially when there's a lot of other stuff going around. So what I might do instead is label it twice, like you would a big long river. I think that's probably the answer here. So we'll label once kind of along this curve, and then once down along here. Let's see how that looks. And I'm going to move this to its own layer, and this random opacity mask layer from something I copied before. We're just going to turn off a lot of the other stuff surrounding it. So labeling it twice will keep the curve under control and keep the amount of tracking that we have to do under control. Yeah, I'm looking for the little handle down here. Flip this up to the other side of the line. And we're still going to want to track it out some, just because that's going to make it easier to manage, and it can dodge around certain features. And but I don't want it to get all upside downy. Andes Mountains. Making sure it's not running into any dots. There it is. It is. No, I didn't want you to move that much. Nope, now that A is on top. Okay. There, we're getting close to some of the dots, but not. Just move slight keyboard increments here. Well, that T. If I can get away with this one, though, that'll be a good starting point. I want that N to be just a hair farther away. But that T in mountains starts to run into something though maybe if I just move it another one farther along. Oh, I might have it. Well, now the S is over the water. If I want to do that, I shouldn't do it halfway. I should actually drag the label out up to here. And at this point, I'm just going to cut my... I'm going to simplify my curve so that I'm not dealing with this big, long, complex thing. Like if it's going to go over the water, there should be at least a character to remind you that actually we mean the place on the other side of the water too. Okay, so now I have enough space to stretch this out just a little bit more. And if we get these far enough apart, I will potentially nudge an individual character up or down in a way that doesn't really visually break the curve. Mountains. Yeah. Alright, sure hope I don't ever have to move that for any reason whatsoever. I will move other things. I'll delete stuff before I have to move that. And so then we have, down here, I have another one. And if I'm labeling the Andes, I should go get a glass of chicha morada, which is a favorite beverage of mine. It's a Peruvian drink, and I've got some in my fridge right now. Curved labels are satisfying, but very difficult sometimes. It'll look good when it's done, but it's one of those things where you try and explain to somebody, I'm a cartographer and I spent an hour on that label just getting into the right spot. Yeah, Andes Mountains. All right, we don't need to deal with the space in between because it's implied. I think that's gonna work. I mean, I could theoretically stretch that down there, but it's gonna start to get really split up. Maybe give it one quick try. But I don't think it's necessary. Oh yeah, because that's going to cause our curve to have to become an S curve as it bends back. I don't like that. All right, I'm going to save this, and we are going to save it. We're going to delete that piece. All right, that was 2 labels over, what, 20 minutes? Something like that. Oh, where'd the Amazon Basin label go? Did I delete that accidentally? I mean, that was easy, so it's not... Oh no, it's in my ARC labels because I haven't moved it to the proper ones yet. That's fine. Next, take these two labels and just shift them into the correct, into the physical features zone. Andes on its own curve over Peru and mountains over Chile. That makes sense too. I've done a couple of these where I've my instinct is to not do that oftentimes, and there's no reason for that. There are typographic styles that involve like splitting and separate curves. I had to do that for a project for a client recently, which maybe I'll show you in a minute, but I did that over here for space reasons. I actually separated each word. They're on their own little curves. This one curves down, this one curves up, this one curves down for the Sierra Madre Oriental, just so I could thread some other stuff between there. This all looks a mess right now, but once the knockouts are in place and the halos, it'll look a lot cleaner. The thing that I worked on for a client that was it's still in progress, but we have a current draft though, is there we go. Is this it's designed to mimic a USGS topographic map style from the mid-century or maybe interwar period. I think it was the example they gave me was from the 30s or 40s. And can I zoom in? Well, I gotta actually turn on proper preview or just open Photoshop. But one thing they did in those old maps, in those USGS maps, that is something I usually don't do, is label rivers word by word, which made a lot of sense back then because you're setting like mostly straight labels, and so you set down a first word, move over, set down another word. Delaware River. I had some curves, but it's not very severe ones. And that took some getting used to say like, State Highway 17, and to separate those kind of things. So that just hasn't been so much my personal style, but it definitely has advantages, and that would definitely work for a situation like this as well. Especially if the map were maybe even a little smaller scale, a little more zoomed out, we'd start to push in that direction where that's practically necessary. So we did the level 1 features. What do we got for level 2? Selvas. Okay, so let's actually turn on some labels. Okay. There's a lot of level 2 features that I want to try and get here, and hopefully, for the most part, they're not going to interfere with my levels. You can see some other features here that are going to be the level 3 features, which are like Cordillera Occidental and so on, that are going to interfere probably with my Andes label, so they probably will get kicked out. Part of the discussion with the client was like, we're going to fit all this stuff in based on these scale ranks, but we'll throw stuff out as needed to just keep things from just where we don't have space. And so that's probably going to be one of those situations where it won't work, because if I'm throwing extra labels along the Andes here and we got all these cities tucked in, might not be doable. But we'll get to that a little later. We'll see what's happening. So what I need is a curve, and I could just draw one, but instead if I take this one, I'm terrible about this. I always grab existing curves that are already drawn, even though I'm going to modify them, because apparently I can't be bothered to just go to the arc tool and do this. I just always copy and paste. The downside, the danger, the reason I probably shouldn't, is because sometimes, I'm making copies by holding Alt, or the Option key, and dragging. But sometimes, if I forget to hold Alt or I don't hold it at the right point, I actually just move something and then I don't realize that I've taken away a label. And it's just missing now forever. So, it doesn't happen too often. And again, this map is going to eventually get checked, which is nice, but that's just a little danger there that occasionally happens. Alright, Selvas. I'm not familiar with this particular topographic name, so this is a good chance for me to learn a little geography here. So the Amazon Basin is in 9 point. Can kick this down to 7 to just really, you know, 8 is probably fine. I just want to make sure that this is hierarchically seen as like underneath. You know, 7 is probably actually a good idea. And it's hierarchically underneath the Amazon Basin. There's not going to be too much going on in this zone, so spreading these letters out that much is probably not too big of a danger. I think they're still going to be seen as hanging together. So I think that will work. Yeah, okay. All right. Llanos. This one's a little less tracked. Let's go 1700. And pin my rotation point there. I appreciate having some of these wide open spaces that I didn't have in a lot of North America except for Arctic Canada. Because it does allow me to label things a little bit more how I like to. Alright, so we got Llanos, Selvas. Let's go down to Patagonia. And if I end up labeling any third level features in Natural Earth, those go in a so that the first, second, and third level features go in these small caps. Third level features go in ordinary case, just to help create, once again, a little bit of a hierarchy here, so that we know that the Allegheny Plateau, which I know is a little hard to read because there's no knockouts yet, but Allegheny Plateau is sort of tucked into the Appalachian Mountains. It's a smaller subsidiary feature. So I'm just creating these little mini hierarchies. The spacing, the positioning of labels creates most of the information that we need, but if I can add a little bit there, that's kind of nice. Patagonia is kind of just figuring out the right curve that kind of expresses the most of it. Oh, no, not there. And this one, yeah, 2000, I don't want to go too big. I think that'll work. Yeah. All right, the Pampas. I haven't labeled a stretch of just physical features in a while. I've mostly been doing cities. Actually, this particular data set, the Natural Earth Physical Geo Regions, I sat next to somebody while she did a lot of the work into this. Some of the work in putting this data set together was done at the University of Wisconsin Cartography Lab. They supported Natural Earth when it was sort of when they needed a lot of labor to get it started. They were one of many people who supported it. And I sat next to somebody, a friend of mine, Sarah Bennett, who was a grad student at the time. And she was doing things like having to figure out, well, what are the boundaries of the Andes Mountains? What are the boundaries of the Pampas? Because, we need to make polygons. And so she was checking various atlases and kind of making judgment calls, because that's an interesting thing about regional labels, is that oftentimes they're vague in a way that's useful, because where does a mountain range end? That's not really anything that has an obvious, clear answer. Could it be, as they start to go under the foothills, or is it at the end of the foothills? Is it when you cross a certain elevation threshold? I don't know. So ordinarily, if you just throw a label over it, it gives people a sense, well, the mountains are here, roughly, but it doesn't have to say anything about the specific boundaries. But with Natural Earth, we've got a shape that we have to, they had to make polygons to define the limits of features so they could put it into the GIS and they could give you a labeling area. So there had to be some judgment calls about where that stuff goes. Same thing with other kinds of features. Where is the edge of a bay or a cape, or where is the end of the peninsula? All these kind of features, there are judgment calls that go in. So she spent a lot of time making that work. Okay, Gran Chaco. Right, and that's got two subfeatures of Chaco Boreal, Chaco Austral. Getting your first atlas ever, hope it's worth it. I mean, the National Geographic atlases are handy references. I mean, I've got my visual atlas of the world, which is a somewhat less detailed product than some of their other, like their standard world atlases, because it has a little bit more photographs involved in it. But it's super handy. I usually keep it in the room in an atlas case, and so I've been checking it a couple of times for certain details about this project, for things that I've got questions about. This is about 10 years old, but most of it's still pretty good. They're kind of the gold standard, though, for a lot of stuff. And I think that I was thinking about context of, my brain went to something like, well, what about using OpenStreetMap or Google Maps or anything like that? But, while they have more information, I don't think there's any substitute for a big paper atlas or a big paper map like this one. This map, again, is about 2 meters wide when it's done. So there's something about having a large physical object that takes up so much of your view. And my thought about that thing I like about those Nat Geo atlases and the visual atlases, it's large. I mean, this thing is, get way back here, you can see it's a couple feet long, right? It's like over half a meter kind of thing. So and I appreciate that sort of openness and space. Did my friend Sarah Bennett follow any rules, Ibrahim? I'm not sure. This was quite a while ago, so I don't remember too many details about how how this all went. I knew she was working on it, and I sort of sat next to her while she was going through some of that work, but I'm not really sure how that was decided. I do know that she had various references to consult, looking at a National Geographic atlas, looking at some other atlases like a Times atlas, and that's where some of these things in Natural Earth come from. Is looking at what are some of these cartographic standards developed over time, and trying to mimic those. So some of the things like the scale ranks in the cities, right? So what cities and towns do you label on a map? It's not just a matter of population, because if you look at many cities, like if you look at all right, Chicago is a very large city. It has suburbs. Many of the suburbs of Chicago are larger cities than towns in Wyoming or South Dakota or whatever. So there's this judgment call about, well, what is regionally important? And there are some mathematical ways that I've approached that in some of my own work, but one of the things they did in Natural Earth was look around at other atlases and say, well, in the middle of the Canadian Arctic, what are some of the places we're labeling? Even if they're tiny and they only have 100 people, they're still important there. We want to include that, versus even if they're nothing compared to the size of a small suburb of New York City or something like that. And so they did look at those kind of things. And it's also, I think, with rivers too, figuring out which rivers to give what scale ranks was a matter of things like, well, this river appears on certain atlases and not others. This one appears in every atlas, so it's really important to include. This one is only there sometimes, so let's make sure to include it, but maybe not as high of a rank. It's not as critical to always include in your maps, because they're just looking at the judgments of other cartographers that way, I think is kind of what goes into that. Grand Chaco. I don't like how that G sits over the boundary, so we'll just tuck that in just a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Thanks so much for joining, Jake. I appreciate having you here for the last, what has it been, like hour and a half. Wow, that's a long haul. So thanks for watching me label. Speaking of map size, do I make the canvas size and the same? Yep. Yes, Ibrahim, my map size in Illustrator is also my canvas size is the same as the print size. I actually was worried when I was getting started on this that there was so much going on in the map that I might actually have to do it in chunks. Like I'd have a file for North and South America, and maybe have a file for Europe and Africa, and a file for Asia and Oceania, split it into pieces just so that it wouldn't run slowly. But fortunately, it's running fast enough that in general I don't need to worry too much. So I can get it all done at one time. And this just helps make sure that I'm doing everything kind of at the actual size, and that I don't run into trouble later if I'm ending up trying to resize things or something like that. Geo Regions. Planalto do Mato Grosso. Is that the next one? Yes. All right then, let's get that. Oh, no, I wanted to move that into the other layer so I can see that. Okay. I think this is also as a roughly circular kind of feature. Oh. Put the line break right there. As a roughly circular feature, we can label it straight. I'm just tweaking my tracking and letting here in off screen and my character panel right over here, just to prove it exists. So now I want to get it kind of centered here, but also make sure we're not stepping on anything important. So this looks fine. Well, could get a little higher up here. Actually, might be a little bit better centered. That's good. Okay. The Brazilian Highlands and the Caatingas. Alright, so that's stacked within one within the other. Oops, I wanted to take that as well. Can I get both of these in here? Brazilian Highlands. So this is a big one. Get a curve that kind of fits that reasonably. And let's get in and inspect it. Alright, that's going to need to shift at least a little to avoid that town. Actually, that's pretty good otherwise. Take it. Yeah. And another region I'm not familiar with. Caatingas. Now I must know. Caatinga, well, my international phonetic alphabet is not Caatinga. Okay, I'm going to stop. Anyway, that's a type of subtropical vegetation. This has it in singular, right? There's no S at the end, whereas Natural Earth's label does have an S at the end. So I'm going to check Nat Geo Atlas here and see what we can see. Let's see, South America. Physical. National Geographic does have it with an S, which I guess makes sense. Like, if it's the name of a type of vegetation, it could be pluralized. In the same way we'd say forest, and we'd call a region the forests. So, okay. Let's keep it that way then. I am gonna tighten this up a little bit. We could, it's got kind of this forked shape here. I think I could flow it like this, actually. Make that curve smaller. So we'll capture sort of this broader extent of it. Yeah, I think that would be nice. And nudge that just a little bit to miss that town. All right, who's next? All right, so we've got all of the second level, and now there's a bunch of third level scale ranks. Some of which we're probably not going to do, because it's just going to start to cause trouble. But let's go with, let's at least start with the largest ones, like the Guiana Shield. And It's big enough that as I said before, I'm usually doing, setting smaller physical features in, not in small caps, but this is a big enough one. Even if it's a third level scale rank, I'll probably still set it in small caps. I'm just trying to build little local hierarchies, and part of that is size, but also part of it is how things stack. So I've got the West Indies in small caps here, and then the Lesser Antilles and Greater Antilles and the Lucayan Archipelago are all set below that, just to kind of clue you in. These are all part of the West Indies. Here it's less about things stacking on top of each other, although that happens some, but this isn't really part of, is it part of the Amazon Basin? It's not really part of the Amazon Basin. It kind of overlaps a little bit, but not, yeah, we're gonna keep this small caps. I think that makes sense in this context. Because it's just big enough that it feels like it deserves that kind of size. And again, there's not too much going on here as far as other competing text needs, so that's going to be easy to get around later on. And label Guiana there, Suriname in there, or maybe it'll fly out like that. And then all the towns should fit just fine. They'll flow into the ocean. Okay. Amazon Delta. Now here's where we're gonna have more stuff going on here, because we're gonna label these cities. But I should be able to just put the words Amazon Delta in the middle here and have all the cities labeled toward the outside of that. And here we will use the smaller type size, or in the non-small caps. Amazon Delta. Could even just track it a hair just to, how about 100 units? I don't know what the units are for tracking. Are those, does anybody know the units that you plug in for the tracking and the kerning? Are those thousandths of an M? I don't know, I mean, if I do 1,000, is that an M space? I mean, it might be an M. So I should look that up at some point, though. What units are we using for that? Illustrator tracking units. Tracking and kerning are both measured in thousandths of an M. Okay. There we go. Relative to current typeface size. All right. My guess was right. Okay, Amazon Delta. So what do we got here? What is this thing? The Planalto Central. All right, so now this one is going to get labeled in the smaller one just because it's near these larger features and we need to kind of emphasize that. I must make the weirdest faces. when I'm staring at labels. I'm just becoming aware of that because I know that I can be seen on camera. Yeah, okay. That one, I think that's going to work. Paginal, the Chaco, Boreal, and Austral. You know, I don't know about the... Okay, well, this one we have certainly have space for. I don't know if we need, like, we have the Gran Chaco. Do we need to divide it into the north and south regions? Yeah, isn't that everyone while working? That's, you know, it's true. Pantanal. Make a little bit sharper curve. And that's that when we track this. It hints a little bit more at that region. Do I want to track that more? Just to let you know it's cross-border. So we'll step on the border there just a little bit. And we'll knock that out eventually. Yungas. I often have a tendency to say aloud the names of the things that I'm labeling in, you know, butchered Spanish or Portuguese or whatever language we're dealing with, wherever we are in the world. And it's like a form of acknowledgement. I'm acknowledging this feature. I'm acknowledging that part of the world by saying a name for it out loud. I haven't saved in a while, so let's do that. Give that a second to spin around. How big are these files? I'm just going to check my here. Well, only 10 megabytes, which is, given how much we've got going on here, that's impressive. I mean, all the base map is a raster and it's referenced to something else. It's not actually, you know, the raster it's pointing to is 1.3 gigabytes. So that's where the real data are stored. Alright, do I want to include these? Do they add anything? Then again, we don't have a lot going on in those areas otherwise. And density is important to this client. This final, when the map is done, it's going to have probably over 3,000 labels. Which is a huge fraction probably of all the labels I will have ever put on in my career. Non-trivial quantity. Alright, that's too much. Way too much. That's better. think this one can be labeled straight. Well, the other option would be to label it curved down here past Philadelphia. I haven't seen that spelled with F's before. Interesting. I think labeling it like that's going to give me the most flexibility later, especially as we get into having to label Paraguay and these towns there. It's going to be tough. All right, we're getting more of these physical features on than I might have guessed. So now what do we have? We have the various. Oh, we got the Atacama Desert. And then we have the subranges of the Andes. Yep, we got room to tuck that in between rows of towns, coastal towns, cities. They might not be towns, they might be cities. I mean, probably many of them are. On a common desert. Oh, Andes already did Andes, yes. And then just the Cordilleras, which again, that's going to be I think the fact that we just have the Andes is going to be fine. I don't think we need to get that granular about it, because we might have room to do. The thing is, you got to do them all, right? It's you know, I might have room for the Cordillera Oriental, like the eastern portion, because there's not as much going on there. The central portion is very dense with other stuff. Fitting that in there would be real hard. Not only because it's got to be fit in there, but it's also got to not interfere with the Andes Mountains label. And if I can't do that one, it would be weird to just have labeling like one of the three, right, between the central, the western, and the eastern. If you can only fit the eastern easily, that's great, but if you can't fit the others, don't do it, because that doesn't make sense. So we're just going to drop them. I'm just going to pull these automatic labels out. So that leaves us with the Altiplano, the high plain, which is also sort of part of them, but it's the kind of thing where that exists in a space where it doesn't need other things to support, other labels to support it. It's not part of a set. So here, I think we can find ourselves a little spot. And I want to not, I need to lock down, I don't want to nudge the Andes label. I'm going to shade this toward the top side of the Altiplano, just because that's where we've got space to not interfere too much with the Andes label. So it's not going to quite be as centered in the feature as we might like, but it's going to give us a hint of it. Altiplano. All right, so that's our geo regions. Whew. That's most of our physical features. Got a peak or two that can be labeled. We got a bunch of rivers. And then we got all the cities, towns, Brazilian states or provinces, whatever the particular designation is for admin 1 units in Brazil, not sure. And countries and capitals and all that good stuff. So let's get started on a little of that. And we've technically got a few Caribbean islands too that are still left. So what I want to do for Colombia is we're going to label, okay, let's turn you off. The Magdalena. We're going to physical features again. We're going to label the rivers where we can find them, and then we will tuck the cities around them as best we can. So we'll get a couple of regional rivers. Magdalena. Go to hydroline style. The challenge with rivers, of which there are many, in labeling them is that, I know this one's hard to see, then again later on it's going to get a halo around it that's going to help it against this darker background, but challenge with rivers, just trying to stretch this out, there we go, of which there are many in labeling them, is that there's often a whole river that changes names many times along its path. And you have to think about, like, well, should I give it every single name? Like the Usumacinta River here goes up into the Highlands in Guatemala. It has something like 7 different names along its course. The Usumacinta is actually the name for only this section here. There's no space to label it all, and it can honestly get confusing, and many of those names are not, widely known, so we often lump them all together under one name. But I often fret about that. Like, am I burying these, regionally important to somebody names? I don't know. Just looking at a couple options of where to put this. That's going to be on an S curve, so that's not real great. I wish I could put it right up here, but the Andes Mountains label is in the way, and I'm never moving that because that was so hard to get right. So we're going to keep it here. It doesn't run into anybody. It sits along the feature. Oh, unless I can... Oh, hold on here. Can I tuck that in? Oof, that's a little risky. I think well, actually I could keep it up here because I'd like it to be a little more central if possible, so you don't have to, your eye doesn't have to search the entire length of the river. If you start in the middle, you don't have to find all the way down at the end, especially in an area that needs a halo. That's a better position. The curvature doesn't quite fit as well. I mean, I can tuck that even harder, but starts to get a little bit rough visually on the label. So I think we're going to keep it a little shallow curved, even though it doesn't quite fit as well. But it generally, I think it's in a more legible position. Magdalena, Meta. All right, that's this one going into the Orinoco. Oh, I said Hydroline. There we go. This one doesn't need to be on a curve. It can play straight. I wish it were going on top, but there's no place to do that very easily, so it's where it's going to live. And Caqueta. What I am trying to do, and why one reason I'm checking these things back here in Natural Earth, is if the name is changing, I want to at least try and put, see, this is the river Japura there for half of its length. Oh, it's got the name there. I just want to make sure that I don't put the label, even if I don't label every name change, I want to make sure the label that I do put down is correct for the area of the river that it applies to. All right, so if we go back up to the United States, for example. I've got the Missouri River. And this little segment here, as it continues into Yellowstone, is the Madison River. And there's even another little part called, I think, the Firehole River. So those have a different name, but I made sure not to put Missouri near those to make sure that at the very least, even if I'm not going to get things like, or the Allegheny. Here I get the Ohio River, and after Pittsburgh, it's the Allegheny. So I made sure that my Ohio label only stayed in the part that was actually the Ohio. And also, now that I'm looking at this, should Ohio maybe go over here instead? That's a little more central. See, you can do this forever. It's pretty tight in here. It's also near the end of the river. This doesn't fit as neatly against the water. Right? This is flat against there, but it's a better position, I think, overall. So it's probably for the best that we do it that way. And that lets me tuck the label for the state a little bit in a little bit more open space. Yeah. And Canton should be up there really to be a little bit, breathe a little bit better. All right, stop obsessing. It was good how it was. It did the job admirably. Okay, so got a few rivers in the area. So now we can start to label some of the other things. How do I want to label the country? You know, if there were nothing else going on, I'd want to flow it down like this. North to south. Colombia, but I don't think that's likely to work. I'll give it a quick go. Pull this existing curved label over here. But we'll probably just label it straight horizontally through kind of the bulk of the country. The Magdalena, well, you know, if we space, well, we got enough room to make that 7 point. You know, this might be doable. I know a lot of people would just say the straight label is fine, but that's just not my style. If I can label things on curves, I like to do it on curves. No, don't. I keep grabbing the wrong thing because again, I gotta have so many layers unlocked to make things work the way that I need to, just so I can have the freedom to do stuff. All right, you know, maybe maybe that'll work. We'll give it a try, and if we run into trouble when we're labeling other stuff, then we'll just shove it over here as like straight line Colombia. But I think that's kind of, you know, we want to include that elegant. The colors are amazing. Well, thank you, Kenny. It's we went through a lot of different palettes. Yeah, lots of different palettes. 7 or 8 or 9 of them at least for the same data set. I mean, so the client's wish was that we had a base map that had a few different colors, and but wasn't political, because oftentimes you might do, you know, I've got this Nat Geo Atlas here, for example. Let me pull like a standard political map page. So, you know, with the National Geographic Atlas kind of thing, you might do, on a lot of maps, there might be a 4 or 5 color scheme that's by country. But the client didn't want political units, so we needed something natural. And we ended up with this sort of land cover, real rudimentary land cover classification of sort of generally forest, generally desert, generally Arctic, generally, you know, grassland, shrubland. And then we spent a long time playing around with what our color is going to be for the base map. And then the text comes from that sort of thing, and which things, what colors do we have left in the color space. And yeah, there's a lot of back and forth. But I actually pitched this specific color scheme, not necessarily think it would get picked up. Clients don't let me use a lot of pinks and reds and burgundies that often. So it's kind of nice to have that opportunity. It's a little different than I might ordinarily do, but it's definitely growing on me here. So now I think we can start labeling cities. Medellin. So you notice there's 2 real close to each other. Medellin and Belo. I'm sure if I like get over to yeah, these are close enough together at our scale that we're just going to drop that. It's just like in North America there were separate dots for Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I just condensed them into Minneapolis, St. Paul. Alright, so yeah, we'll keep that. Political maps are overrated. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, like, this is a balance, political, physical. So we got some, you know, we're definitely showing all the political units, but they're kind of, it's interesting. Usually you have a physical map or a political map, and there tends to be not a lot of in-between spaces, and that's because I think it's a lot harder to cram some of the labels in there, but we're making it work. We're making it work. Medium city. I kind of like how these little symbols turned out. If I go up to my symbols palette, you can see for like the scale ranks 4 through 6, the smaller things in natural earth, the less regionally important, and then to the medium importance and the high importance. And it's kind of like a little, you get your little village, and then like tall buildings are going up. I kind of like how that turned out. I mean, maybe this shouldn't be a rounded shape. Maybe it should be more of just a flat square, but I didn't like how that looked. So it just hints at the concept without being too direct about it. Yeah, Cartagena can't go there because it runs in the Isthmus of Panama, so we'll just put it right there. And if we really run into trouble and need space, we'll curve it from the ocean inward. Tuck that under there to not run into Panama City. Panama used to be part of Colombia, but then the United States wanted a canal right there, and so we intervened to help separate Panama from Colombia to make sure that that happened. How did I choose this palette? Self-made. I mean, it was a self-made palette. I just spent a lot of time. You know, we spent about 40 odd hours, 45 hours getting the style before I did any labeling, and all that was back and forth on palettes. A lot of feedback from the client, client saying, well, I want bold colors here, I want darker, I want lighter. So, at first I started by just playing with colors and saying, I like this color, I like that color. And then I sent things to the client. And the client comes back and says, well, actually, I want you to change, I want it darker, I want it lighter, I want it more or less red. And so that pushes me in certain directions, which narrows the space that I can explore, which makes it easier. But, mostly I just mess around to make those things happen. I'm noticing here in Colombia, I don't know, did I change something? Because this wasn't running into stuff before. And now it was running into that M and that N, and it wasn't before. Did I change something? Might have accidentally nudged it. But now it's fine. Also, I noticed that was in the wrong layer. That was in the physical features layer, so good thing we fixed that. And do I have my variant name reference on? I do. Okay. I do have that. Manzanales. Okay, put Kali down there. Make sure that doesn't touch the O or the U in my sacred Andes Mountains label that was so hard to get in place. And we kind of got everything on that side of the Magdalena. Earlier designs, sure. Let me see. Let me see what we have here. A lot of this stuff is in kind of a junk folder, and I just threw all these files into one. There are hundreds of files in this folder now. So I'm just sorting through by date. So I have some early mock-ups. I mocked up a section of Africa in a few different styles of what kinds of base data we might use, whether we'd use something with population or something political or something physical, different typefaces, just to show a few options. So we had those 5. Even made up a pretend lake there just because in my section I didn't have a large lake and I wanted to show some of the ways that would come out. And some of these look pretty classic atlasy, some of them don't. And then we ended up, this color palette started us down the path of reds. And then, what else do I have? And that was back in May. Yeah, that was May of this year. When, Going in detail there. Don't need to pull up the full thing. We're looking at some colors for our different land cover. For different biomes. You're getting more to the pinks and oranges. Fruity colors, I called that. Earthy. Deserty, because we decided to basically in each of these narrow the range of colors we were covering. Whereas before we had sometimes we were doing a lot of a broader, more rainbow kind of range, and here I tried to get things in, push them to a little bit less color space usage. And yeah, these are the same color palettes. Those are the 7th round of mock-ups. Moving toward pinks and reds and different variations and purples. And up at where we are pretty much now, except we swapped out which colors meant which things eventually. That was the main change from that point. So yeah, that was, over the course of a few months. It wasn't constant work. It was, I'd send something, I'd hear back in a few weeks, I'd reply a while later while working on other things in the meanwhile. But, we ended up in a pretty different place, and it took a while, but the important thing is the client is happy, and that's where we need to get. Let's see. You want every single one of those drafts. Well, it's, if you go over the video and later on, when this, go back to YouTube, freeze frame, and you can just eyedropper those colors right into Photoshop, do some screenshots, and you can make use of those. And of course, there are plenty of other palettes that I was just messing around. There are plenty of times I'd change a color and it looked terrible, so I didn't save that one. So that what you see is the final thing, but it doesn't show all the in between where it wasn't quite looking great. So Bogota, I need to find a place for this. Got a lot of other words in the way, like Colombia. If I could make... No. And we're going to also have Via Vincencio. I mean, I can put these on curves if I need to. It'd be nice if that town wasn't there. I hope nobody's from that town, because that's offensive to say that I didn't want their town to exist. But as a cartographer, there's lots of times when you think, boy, I wish that feature just didn't exist. It'd be real convenient for me. Yeah, so what we can do, can certainly look at putting this on a curve. In the end, a curve is probably what it's going to be. What is this blue thing here? That's the Llanos. Okay, that can definitely shift a little bit if I need to, and I could run Bogota into there. I mean, the other option is letting Bogota be a straight label, let Colombia be a straight label, because that would certainly free up space. That would free up space. And if I was doing this at like a 600, easily put that right there, and everybody gets what they want and they're happy as far as having room for other stuff. But it does leave this area a little empty, which, I mean, it is like it's in the middle of the rainforest, the Amazon. There's not a lot of people, not a lot of settlements. There are some people, certainly. There's some people who live non-urban lifestyles. That is tricky. What makes me decide when to label a city? This is all natural Earth data, so it's all in their populated places data set, and they have a scale ranking. So they say, here's the top cities, the next set of cities, the next set down below that. And I picked scale ranks 0 through 6, the top 7 groups. If you go to scale rank 7, there becomes too many cities for a map this size, so scale rank 6 was a good number. It's a couple of thousand, and so they're deciding based on population data sets, based on checking atlases, based on regional importance. So small towns in the middle of nowhere are important to label versus large cities that are parts of big urban areas already. Yeah, I could definitely tuck Bogota there, but nope. The curve labels are just more interesting. We're gonna stick with what I do, with what I know. It's gonna be great. Occasionally we'll cut things out even though it's in the data set. Just I have here, these are the ones that I have to label. This is a small fraction of the overall. It's filtered. I also look at things like the minimum zoom that they've got set up, where I'll zoom in and out of a web map and see when cities go in and out. So if it's real tight, I'll decide prioritizing certain cities over others. if I have to. Okay, just pulling a curve down here. Via Vincenzo. Can I get that? Yeah. Alright, that'll tuck right in there for that dot that you can kind of not see. But again, these all get haloed a little bit just to boost them over the very darkest areas. I'm just looking at my number of viewers, and there's 2 people left, which is fine. I mean, I'm got to do this work anyway, but it's interesting to look at. There's like a curve: people coming on, people going off. So things have tapered off a little bit. At some point in the near term, I will need to stop because I'm going to need to eat lunch. I've been doing this all morning, and it's 1 o'clock here in the afternoon, and I'm going to be hungry. And then I'll probably be right back to this, but at that point I'll probably be doing it on the side. I might actually fix that error I saw earlier where some of the land was missing. That'll probably be the probably do that off stream. That'll be my next thing, because I got to get that fixed before I do too much more labeling out in island areas, because otherwise it's going to burn me, because there's going to be some bit of land that I don't see and I don't know is out there that I need to reference with my label. Tumaco, Pasto. I could probably do that centered so it stays inside the country rather than flying over the country border. Yeah. Okay. Medium city. And it's been a little bit since I've put my labels into their label categories. So after I did that after I did the Lesser Antilles earlier, so I'm gonna have to do that too. Can I fit this? I mean, without stepping on the Magdalena, I'm gonna have to curve. So I pull this curve from here. And we decide to go back to your thing about like certain threshold, like you have to pass more than 500,000. You know, to give you an example of the natural earth stuff, some of these places here literally have 50 people as the population, the official population. They might serve a sort of more dispersed area though, where, you know, maybe there's a village of 50 people. I think Uranium City is pretty small. But there are more people in the area who live in smaller communities, or sort of homesteaders and or you know, subsistence living. Population in 2016 of Uranium City is 73 people. But it's the biggest and most important settlement for hundreds of kilometers around, so it needs to go on the map. Because it has that meaning. So that's the nice thing about the Natural Earth data set, is that they account for those kind of things. Cucuta could kind of, yeah, there's no, is this gonna, or I could, you know, when I flip it, could put it like this. If I flip, no. We're just going to go like this. That'll work. Maybe a little more curvature to it, since it's short. That'll work. And it's just real packed in there along that area, along the border. Kia. But if I start to put that there, we run into Maracaibo, which you haven't labeled yet. Santa Maria is going to be 2 lines, so it takes up a little more space efficiency. One thing I'm doing, This seems to be pretty common cartographically as far as I can tell. It's sort of an inconsistency. It's pretty common to abbreviate Saint. Like, you know, St. John's, or the St. John River, ST period. But Santa doesn't often get abbreviated. Or Santo, right? Other variations of that word, that, you know, whether it's French or Spanish or whatever version of it you're dealing with, tends to not get abbreviated. Not sure why that is. At least in English mapping. The only example I can think of is Sault Ste. Marie, which is always spelled with the STE period. Barranquilla. Well, we can do one thing. We can have it curve down here, flow in, sort of north of Maracaibo, which is over here. Or we can have it curve down from up here. So let's do both and see how it looks. This is more horizontal, which is nice. It tends to feel a little bit better, and we move Santa Maria over so it doesn't feel as tight. So it's got a little bit more space to breathe, a little farther away from Maracaibo. I think that'll work. In Arabic you have no shorthand. It's true, but well, there's some interesting things in Arabic typography. But you can also, so you have to write the whole word out. And of course, you know, I can track labels out, right? I've got Caribbean Sea, and I can thread things in between, whereas you've got Cashitas connecting everything. Although, depending on the text, you can also run labels crosswise over each other, potentially, if you need to. I've had to do that. Maracaibo, Aruba. I should get Aruba going here. Aruba, Netherlands. That's gonna need this. So I've got little bits of the Caribbean I still haven't finished because they were close to land, and I wanted to get some of the land under control. There we go. And Curacao, also part of the Netherlands. I'm going to copy that because I don't remember how to write the C with the Sadia, or however you say it, underneath it. And I think that's Option C on a Mac keyboard, I think. Yep, that's your... okay, so that's Curacao. Technically, Curacao is that one. The one next door just says Netherlands. Is that one of those not incorporated into a thing, into a constituent country? Bonaire. Yeah, that's... Bonaire is... Now, the Netherlands has a weird political structure. It's not weird. That's judgmental sounding. But like, these are separate constituent countries. Aruba and Curacao, part of the kingdom, along with the mainland Netherlands, and those constituent countries make up the Netherlands. Whereas Bonaire is not a constituent country. It's just part of the mainland country. These are all these facts you learn when you have to label maps. Curacao. Yeah, I'd forgotten that you. I'd seen a mention on Twitter that Ibrahim, that you were the one who had done the Equal Earth Arabic translation. I was like, I know that person. That person comes to my streams, and that's great of you to do that work too, because it's great that Natural Earth is the Equal Earth map is available in so many different languages. And I'm not really aware of the cartography scene outside of the English-speaking world, because I don't really have good language skills outside of English. But so I guess I don't know like what in all these other languages that it's available in. I don't know to what extent there are sort of widely available, good quality world maps available in some of those other languages. But I have the sense, for at least some of them, that Equal Earth is becoming sort of one of the main resources for that sort of thing, because there isn't so much. Before I label, I should label these first. These places that are most in the way here: Coro and Punto Fijo. Alright. Coro. And if I just tuck Maracaibo down a little bit, Coro will fit. Ordinarily I like to label things up here like this. It feels a little bit better. It has some reading advantages. Actually, I can do that. I can, because I can just move Curacao a little bit. That's doable. That's not on the feature anyway. Yeah, I don't know, Alex. It's a mystery. No, I mean, it's something I could look into, certainly. Probably, with help of people who are more familiar with the scenes there in other countries and other languages. One nice thing about my time working with the Atlas of Design project, which I'll give a quick plug for, yeah. The Atlas of Design is a project that I helped, I co-founded with Tim Wallace, who's now at the New York Times. He and I started this series under our professional society, the North American Cartographic Information Society, NACIS. And we publish every other year. We publish, I got some on my shelf here, so I'm looking at them. We publish books of maps. And it's literally just, it's a book of 30 beautiful maps, 30 or so, along with some commentary by the authors here. How well can you, let me switch over, how well can you see it? Yeah, okay. With some commentary by the authors about what they did and why they did it. And we have a global competition to publish, because there's lots of beautiful maps out there, more than 30 every other year. So what we do is we put out a call for maps, and we get hundreds of submissions. And one of the things that we really want to do with the Atlas of Design is try and make it representative of global cartography, not just people in America and Europe, people who are speaking English. We want to show maps from all over the world and show what the state of the art is everywhere. And we've had some maps, in Chinese, and we've had maps in various other languages and from other parts of the world here and there. Not as much as I would like, but part of the challenge is getting more people to be aware of the Atlas of Design, so that when the call for participation goes out, which right now it is, you can submit for Volume 6, making people more aware of that so that they can participate. And at one point, I don't know if it's true anymore, but the call for participation in the submission form used to go out in several other languages. It looks like they've switched systems, so they don't have that anymore, but it'd be great if they have the opportunity to bring that back so that we can really, continue to reach people all around the world. So if you know about the Atlas Design, people who are making great maps, tell them about it, submit your own work in other languages. Definitely like to see this continue to kind of spread around the world. Yeah. So, just a plug for that. Your first experience labeling in Arabic. Yeah, I mean, like transliterations are a challenge. It is, and that's true. I'm making this world map here, and there's a lot. It's all going to be labeled in Latin characters, and so I'm going to be moving over to the Arab world, and I'm going to be moving over to the Chinese-speaking world, and there are different systems for putting Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, etc. into Latin characters, and people have different criticisms of those kind of things, and that's the kind of thing that places, one of the reasons I've checked things against the U.S. Board on Geographic Names is that they have put in a lot of thought to some of these things about how can we show this in a way that kind of represents a little bit more what people say versus conventional things, even for stuff like, even in Europe, like places like, Moskva instead of Moscow. We say Moscow, but that's not what people in Russian say. They say Moskva. And so I'm going to be including some of those things here and there where I can. So, but there's definitely always challenges with that. And yeah, AI is right to left languages in Illustrator. I actually downloaded for a previous project where I had to work in Arabic. I downloaded the Arabic language, like the Arabic Illustrator. That's actually all the interface is still in English, but it's slightly designed to work. Like I can change the text direction, and I can if I were typing in Arabic, I can set instead of the tracking, I can set the length of kashidas and such like, and so it has a few other things, although it keeps defaulting to Arabic now when I want to type in English. So but it is a little bit, it's not quite perfectly tuned to doing the typography correctly, but it is a little bit better than the English one. So I'm catching up here on chat here. Alex, you're hoping to get the Atlas design someday. Yeah, that's, money is tight, and they're not, especially with shipping, getting them to a lot of the rest of the world. It can be a bit of a challenge. It'd be an interesting idea for nieces to be able to offer, like, we have, as a society, we do things like travel grants and such. Do like book grants. That'd be kind of fun. Like, or we have like, giving away a set of Atlas of Design copies to people who apply for them who otherwise might not be able to access them. That'd be kind of, that's something I can mention to the team for them to consider, and then maybe you could apply for like an Atlas of Design grant, so you can get those copies without having to worry about the cost. Get a complete set, or at least, well, we don't have volume 4 is out of print, so we have 1, 2, 3, and 5, but we might bring volume 4 back. We'll see. I mean, you're talking about like, the popularity cartography. It's not, even in the United States, most people don't know that cartographers exist. There's a lot of cartographers. There are a few hundred probably people come to the professional society meetings, but outside of that, most people don't know we exist. I think most maps are not made by cartographers. If you needed a map and you didn't know how to make one, you might hire an illustrator, right? Like a graphic artist, because a lot of the time those people don't even know that GIS exists, so they won't hire a GIS person either. So I think certainly GIS people make a lot of maps, part of their jobs, but I think probably illustrators and artists end up making a lot of them too, just because that's what people can think of. They don't know that there's sort of a specialty profession. Also, it's great to see everybody chatting. I've seen like there's the ideal for somebody who's live streaming is not only to interact with you, but to see you interact with each other. That's pretty great. That's building a community. And I know I don't stream often enough to really like have a community. Like I my girlfriend streams, she does gaming, and she's on there several times. Like most, she does like a week at a time, every day in the week, and then she takes a week off. But she's on there 15 days a month, and so that's enough for her to like have regular people that know each other as well and say hi to each other. So that's kind of fun. And I'm probably never going to be the sort of person who streams super often, but I appreciate that we're building these little moments together. This label here, kind of want to curve it a little bit away from Maracaibo just to make sure that there's no confusion when you see this dot, that you don't think, oh, it's this town. No, it's Maracaibo. So let's, this is, again, we got to be clear and unambiguous in our labeling. Oh, that's what we want. And that created an ambiguity, and this, just that little curvature helps solve that ambiguity. There we go. GIS web development. I mean, there's definitely more jobs in both GIS and web development than there are in cartography, and I think a lot of people definitely do cartography because they already have a web job, and somebody says, can we put a cool map on there? And so we've definitely, in my professional society, we have people who don't make maps super often, and that it's just more of an interest of theirs, or they now make maps sometimes and they kind of stumbled into it because of things like web development. So I think that's a pretty common experience. I just I lucked into cartography entirely by accident. I just happened to be in graduate school at a university that had cartography, and I didn't like my existing graduate program. I was doing history of science. I was going to become a historian, and it turns out I was not that good at it. So but I liked maps, and it turned out I took a map making class for fun, and I realized, wait a minute, I could just do this for a living. So I never really got into the web mapping, web GIS, web development stuff. I pretty much just do static maps all the time. See, San Fernando, I don't like that it's crossing the river, but there's not a lot of other good places for it, because if I do here, it starts to get close. Well, if I just do that, and maybe Merida can go like that. That makes this all more crowded. Yeah. Whereas this is a little less crowded. And so, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Everything will be great. That's our motto. I should label the Orinoco River real soon before we start putting too much other stuff in the zone. Because that's otherwise going to be a problem. Make sure these rivers are... So, based on the way that the natural data works, you see the stream there, and then it goes into this little inlet, this little widening that is part of the coastline. And that can look a little awkward at times, so I'm also, as I go along, sometimes manually extending these a little bit. Ordinarily, this is, with a lot of map designs, there's actually a stroke around the coast. We didn't go in that direction, but a lot of maps would do that, and that would solve that issue as well. But we live with it, especially when, you zoom out. I'm looking at a section of map right now that is, I don't know, how big is it? 10 centimeters wide? It's not big. Where's my ruler? We get rulers in Illustrator, right? View rulers, show rulers. Alright, this is in points. Units. So from 179 to 100, this is like 6 or 7 centimeters wide. So it's not exactly, you're not going to see those tiny details if it doesn't cleanly, perfectly hit the coast, because it just won't print. So, just to... I'm going to put my units back to points. That's how I think. I think in points, which is a weird, awkward measurement. Me and John Nelson have revived this. I appreciate being put in the same company as John Nelson. John Nelson's a friend of mine. He and I are both from Michigan, and we talk about Midwestern-y things when we get together at conferences, and we're both quiet, awkward Midwesterners, and I'm glad he's been putting out content. He has the advantage of getting paid to, like, part of his job is he gets to do that stuff, which usually for me this is a side thing. So he can put out a lot more content a lot more often than I can. But I'm glad he's doing that sort of thing. And John has, because of where he works at Esri, he reaches a lot more GIS audience. I tend to reach more of an audience that's focused on, that's already sort of in the Carto sphere, in the cartographic world. But I think, and John certainly has a lot of respect among those people, but he also has the ability through his job and the promotion that Esri gives him to kind of be able to spread his ideas and skills out into sort of the broader GIS community, those people we were just talking about who maybe make maps more occasionally on the side. So yeah, I started streaming a couple years ago. I actually thought about it for 2 or 3 years before that. Actually more than that. Back in 2016, I remember chatting with Sarah Bell and Adam Wilbert, and we were meeting in Bellingham, Washington, where both of them live, and I was passing through, and so we got together to chat, and I talked about, like, we should all start streaming, and that'd be great. And then of course none of us did because we had other things going on. But eventually I said, all right, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna do it. This is the smaller size capital, isn't it? So notice there's a variant listed here: Port of Spain with or without hyphens. So the official U.S. federal name is Port of Spain without hyphens, whereas the natural earth name is Port of Spain with hyphens. Wikipedia is saying it without hyphens. I'm going to quick check my atlas here. So it sounds like Natural Earth's name is probably... Oh, National Geographic has hyphens. I'm going to go with the federal name without that. I'm going to go with the federal name. I think that's... There's no reason to hyphenate it, I don't think. That little green circle behind there that's warning me. Oh, I deleted the star, not the circle, and it's going to take a minute. For some reason, my symbols layer is running real slow, so I'm going to undo that. Yeah, Sarah Bell and Adam Wilbert. I met Adam Wilbert actually through the Atlas of Design that I was just showing earlier. He submitted something to the first one. He doesn't make too many maps. He doesn't have as many opportunities to do that. It's not where he earns his money. It's more of a side thing for him, but he does great work, and he's a great guy, and we've bonded and nerded out over various other interests, like Mystery Science Theater 3000, a television show, and those kind of things. So and typography things. And Sarah Bell is doing great work, and I know that she with her work with Esri also gets to do some video work and some live streams, and so, sort of that group of us who talked about doing live streaming, I'm glad that she has gotten into doing some of that as well. And she was a participant in my How to Do Map Stuff event last year, where I tried to get a bunch of people live streaming, because I was hoping, it was like a mini online conference, but what I wanted was people to have that experience doing live streaming, and hopefully one or two of them would say, yeah, I want to keep doing this. And for the most part, that hasn't happened too much. But I'm glad at least people had the experience of giving it a try. What I'm realizing is I don't know where to put the word Venezuela. Before I get too into this, I better make a plan. And then after that, after I get this label in place, I might stop because I am getting hungry and I need to eat. But we'll get this one situated first. No, I did not want to ruin that river by dragging that point out there. We'll just undo that. Did few people continue for a while? I guess maybe I didn't notice it. But again, you know, maybe I just wasn't tuned in. But at the very least, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, spreading those skills around, showing people what can be done. It was sort of, you know, a middle of the night idea I had about the pandemic. I remember, like, it was 2 a.m. and I was trying to go to sleep, and I thought of this idea. And then I got up and emailed John Nelson, because I bounce ideas off him sometime, and I said, hey, do you think people would be into this? And I got a lot bigger response than I thought from people all over the world, which I should have asked people when they signed up where they lived, because scheduling became a real problem, because I had to figure out, like, wait a minute, I don't want this person's time slot to be when they're trying to sleep. And so I needed to figure all of that out. San Fernando. Okay, so I can delete this reference label. San Fernando. I don't want to have to make this 3 lines. That works if I have to. But let's make a copy and see if we can find a different spot for it. And we were talking before about putting it up there. No, because if I did that, no. It's long, so if I curved it in, it'd have to go basically along here. It wouldn't fit between San Cristobal and Merida. San Fernando. No, it's not going to work. This might be where it goes. My other option... Oh, well, I spelled Venezuela wrong. So this is why don't type things yourself. Copy the labels. Oh, no. All right. Well, it's not any shorter or any longer after correcting the spelling, so it is as it is. No, there's nowhere. If I could... I mean, the other option, again, put it straight. Put it like... right here, but then it's going to start to run into, you know, if I put it here, if I put Venezuela, am I spelling that right? I've been looking at it wrong long enough that I'm suddenly not right. It's an E, right? Man, it's a good thing. Good thing someone's going to look over this, and it's a good thing I'm not typing too many of the labels. But let's look at an option. Instead, we put it somewhere here-ish, in which case San Fernando could maybe go up here, back to where we said it was less ideal and more crowded, but and we move Merida. And it would, yeah, that NOZ, the EOZ. I mean, I'm comfortable with that myself because they're different colors. They're different colors and they're on different curves. So I think that distinguishes them. It's not as ideal, though. Definitely. So it's really a balance of what's a higher priority. You know, clearing that and maybe moving San Fernando into a better position versus leaving the country label in a not great spot. Where it does the job to tell you that this polygon means Venezuela. But I think that's going to be okay. I think that's fine. Yeah. And again, yeah, since they're different colors, I think that to me is the big thing when those curves cross. I'm not shy about that. And same thing over here, you know, mountains, Colombia. So, yeah. Oh, hey, Matt Lamb. Haven't seen you in an age. Hope you're doing all right. Yeah, I try and, you know, in general, I try and match features, color of label to color of feature, either the same color or close. Kind of depends on what your needs are, and that helps a lot, I think, to, you know, clue people in as to what goes with what, and it even helps in crowded situations like this where, look, I got Bogota, and it's next to 2 point features, but it's clear which point feature it goes with, because it's the white one that goes with the white one, and the red one down here goes with the red one. So it can also really help when you have those dense areas. So we've done some good work today over the past 3 hours. Wow. This is probably a record live stream for me in length. But I gotta eat, so I think I'm gonna save this and wrap things up here. But I hope this was enlightening to you. Before we leave off, as always, I would like to give a special thanks to my generous patrons, the people who help support all this various side work that I do. I mean, this is part of a paid client project, but, you know, it does add a little extra work to be able to, you know, kind of share it all with you. And so, yeah, thank you to them. And again, if you want to support my work, the best thing you can do is tell other people about it. Point them to my YouTube, point them to my blog. You know, if you point them to somethingaboutmaps.com. And of course, spending your time with me is also supporting my work, because I appreciate having you here. It certainly beats talking to an empty room. With that, though, I think I will leave off for the time being. I may come back to... I'm going to be labeling this map for a long time. And at some point I may come back and do another live stream about it. Probably won't be tomorrow, but you know, there may be another one of these in the future, definitely. So, you know, subscribe, hit that notification bell, but also stay tuned on Twitter. You can always check me out on twitter.com/pinacographos, and, you know, find me there. And I usually announce things as they're happening. Otherwise, that's it for me. So I hope you all have a good evening, good morning, good day, and